What's up, ladies and gentlemen of YouTube, Boogie2988, coming at you live once again through the power of the internet. And this is my review of Endgame. So if you've never seen one of my YouTube movie reviews, I tend to do these, the first half spoiler-free, the second half I get into the spoiler section. Don't worry, I'll give you plenty of warning before we get into the spoilers. Whenever I try to do one of these reviews, I try to determine whether or not you should see the movie on opening weekend, wait a couple of weeks to see when the tickets get a little bit cheaper, or if you should just wait for home video or skip it altogether. And in the case of Endgame, I think you should see this on opening weekend if it's possible. It's not going to be possible for everybody, but there's some major spoilers here that could ruin the movie for you. And I definitely think you should see it in the theater because it looks amazing on screen. I mean, there's so much happening at some parts of this movie. It's impossible to get it all. I really do need to see this movie a second time because there's just so much happening at certain points of the movie. Now, this is an emotional thrill ride for me, but that's because I personally have dedicated a lot of the last 11 years into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. These stories were with me when I was growing up as a kid, and they've been a big part of my life. So to see Endgame, to see the end of round one of what Marvel has created here in the Cinematic Universe is really amazing. There's never been anything like it. I mean, the movie is clearly a triumph. Everything that they have done since the first Iron Man to the end of this film is a triumph. There's never been anything like it. It kind of makes Lord of the Rings look dinky by comparison. Now, I think your mileage may vary on this depending on how much of yourself you have put into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. If you've put a lot of time and effort into it the way I have, if you've rewatched every movie several times, if they have been a part of your life for the last 11 years, then this is going to be a very emotional movie for you. If you're just a casual viewer who's seen some of the movies, mostly just the Avenger core stuff, you're not a big fan of some of the characters, then this is not going to be a very emotional movie for you, but it is going to be a fun movie. I mean, it's got some really cool twists, some really cool plot turns, some really interesting stuff. I really do think even just a casual watcher will enjoy this movie as long as you saw the last one. But if you're a dedicated fan like me, then I do recommend that you bring some Kleenex because you're probably going to cry your eyes out at points. It's a very emotional movie. There were periods of time I was smiling so big I swore the implants were going to pop out of my mouth. There were periods of time there that I was crying so hard I really wish I had brought a bucket of Kleenex. Now, I went into this movie with spoilers because people were really dedicated this time to trying to spoil this movie on Twitter, on Facebook, on Reddit. People are even sending me emails with misleading headlines to try to get me to read those emails. And someone on Twitter was successful. I did read one of the spoilers. But even with this movie spoiled, there was enough twists and turns to where I was just shocked at what was happening on the screen a lot of the times. Even knowing how this movie was going to end, it really kept me interested. The writing on this was really good. Now, the movie is not perfect, though. There are definitely moments that might frustrate you or irk you or throw you out of the moment because they made some interesting choices, made some interesting decisions, and there are some plot developments that don't really add up. Some plot holes for sure, but it doesn't really matter. Overall, it's way better than I expected it to be. Now, the last movie, Infinity War, will probably always be the superior movie in my mind. The same reason that Empire Strikes Back will always be better than Return of the Jedi in my mind. They had an opportunity to do something there that they've never been able to do before. Truly subvert expectations. Infinity War had poetic license to do whatever the hell it wanted to do. It just got to be its own movie. This movie is a little more predictable because it does exactly what it has to do, which is answer all of the questions from the last movie and also put a big period at the end of that 11-year chapter of the first big chapter of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So it's fairly predictable because of that. But they still kept you guessing as you go through the movie, and I'm glad for that. Regardless of the specific plot points, the specific moments, the specific character development, this is a triumph, an 11-year triumph. And when they went into this, making the first Iron Man movie, I had no clue, as much as I enjoyed the first Iron Man movie, that it would lead to this, and I can't believe they accomplished it. I can't believe they pulled it off. And as far as movies go, this now surpasses Star Wars or Lord of the Rings or any of my other favorite franchises as my favorite franchise. I never expected to experience anything like this in my lifetime, and now that I have, I'm ecstatic. It was amazing. As someone old enough to actually experience Return of the Jedi in the theaters, let me say that you guys were so lucky that you guys got your version of the original Star Wars trilogy. In a lot of ways, this is better. Certainly a lot more movies, a lot more characters, a lot more love. I mean, this is your phenomenon, and I hope you guys truly respect it for what it is. So yes, see this movie as quickly as possible. Try to avoid spoilers. It is definitely worth seeing on the big screen. And if you have to wait till home video, try to avoid the spoilers for the next 3 months because it's worth it. There's some really epic moments in this film. Still reeling, and it's been like 12 hours since I saw it. Now, here comes the spoilers. I am about to spoil things. I want you to do me a favor, hit pause of this video, go watch the movie, come back and watch this section of the video once you have seen the movie, okay? Because spoilers are inevitable. Time travel. I mean, yeah, we all knew from the leaks what that was what it was going to be. And time travel is difficult. And once you open that can of worms, you really can't close it. So I don't know what it means for the future of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But here we are. Now, that's nothing new to the comics. I mean, the comics have had parallel universes and parallel realities and time travel for quite some time. So that's not abnormal for the comics. And they certainly are able to write their way around it there. And they were able to write their way around it here in the cinematic universe as well. And as long as it's used sparingly to create interesting stories, I could really see it working well with Doctor Strange, for example, then I think it's going to be okay. Thanos doing what he does at the beginning of the movie there by snapping again is a really interesting way to tell this story. And that unceremonious dispatching of Thanos is probably one of my favorite moments of the movie. He did go for the head. Speaking of Thor, I think what they did with him is going to be one of the most contentious parts of this film, but I'm just going to say it. Fat Thor is my spirit animal. It's one of my favorite parts of this movie. This is one form that anxiety and depression and PTSD can take. It can kind of make you into a fat joke. Trust me, I know. Now, they've done this shtick one time before, and that's what kind of annoys a lot of people here, because they feel they did it so much better with Tony Stark and the Battle of New York and his PTSD from that, and it resulting in him becoming addicted to being Iron Man. And this time it was used as comedic relief, but as someone who suffered the same experiences as Thor and made some of the same decisions as Thor post-trauma, I really don't have a problem with it. So you don't have to be offended for me, trust me. I actually really enjoyed that part of the movie, and it felt good to be represented in some way in the Marvel Cinematic Universe for me, so deal with it. Another really big source of contention for this film is the battle for the Soul Gem, about who gets to commit suicide for the Soul Gem. Will it be Hawkeye or will it be Black Widow? And admittedly, I think they made the right choice. Black Widow definitely has less to live for, whereas, Hawkeye has a family to go back home to, so I think that was the right decision. But as someone who's dealt with suicidal thoughts his entire life due to trauma, I really related to that scene. I think it's one of my favorite scenes, period. And I personally love that this movie decided to deal with themes like PTSD and anxiety and depression and suicidal ideals, because how could you not? When half of everyone that ever existed evaporates in front of you, how would you not deal with that trauma? That should have been, and I'm glad it was, the core theme of this movie. The other overarching theme of the entire series seems to be failing until you get it right. From the beginning of Infinity War to the end of Endgame, it's failing and failing and failing and failing and failing again until you finally nail it. That's what life is, and I'm glad to see that represented on the big screen as well. Now, as for stuff I like, I love Professor Hulk. I was so glad to see Professor Hulk on the screen, and I really, really would like to have a Professor Hulk movie, whether it talks about the 5-year gap in between the beginning and the end of Endgame, or whether or not it just moves on from there, but I love what they did with Hulk. I've always loved Professor Hulk. I think a lot of people also are frustrated by the retirement of Captain America. Not specifically the fact that he went back in time and decided to spend the rest of that time with the love of his life. I think anyone with a heart should find that okay. But when it comes to passing the torch of Captain America, passing on the shield, I see a lot of people questioning whether or not it should have been Bucky. And I think in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, it shouldn't be, because the Winter Soldier is a contentious person right now. He's done some really awful stuff. Hawk is kind of pure, so it kind of makes sense that he would become the next Captain America. I mean, don't get me wrong, I also think the decision was made so that they could have a black Captain America, and they did it for the sake of diversity. I also understand that, and I agree with it. I just don't have a problem with it. I don't think the Winter Soldier in this instance would make a very good Captain America, and it probably should be Hawk. When it comes to Captain Marvel, she only gets about 15 minutes of screen time, and that 15 minutes of screen time is her being very stiff and awkward again. And that makes sense because, according to an interview she did with Jimmy Fallon, she actually filmed her scenes for Endgame before they shot Captain Marvel, so I guess she wouldn't have gotten any better between the two movies. In fact, presumably she would be worse, and she kind of is. And another talking point that I've seen quite often is that moment towards the end of the film, and we saw it in Infinity War as well, when we saw all of the women band together to make a great poster moment where all of the women are facing off against Thanos the first time and Thanos again the second time. Again, I just don't really have a problem with it, though it does feel a bit forced, so it does kind of throw you out of the movie when they do it, but it's fine. It's fine. It's just fan service. Speaking of fan service, that entire final battle, from the moment that Thanos comes forward in time to the very end of that battle, I've never seen fan service like that. I was smiling so hard, I swear I was going to rip open my freshly healed mouth. I swear I was going to pass out. I was smiling so hard. I need to see that scene a second, a third, a fourth, a fifth time, because so much happens. And that last 15 emotional minutes, just like the end of The Lord of the Rings, giving you ending after ending, it's just amazing stuff. I mean, it really shows that they are passing off the torch and letting Scarlett Johansson and Robert Downey Jr. and the others say goodbye. And it sucks to see him go, but what a great tenure they had. And speaking of Robert Downey Jr., absolutely, this entire 10, 11 years has been his story arc from the very first Iron Man movie, where he was cast as a washed-up, out-of-work actor to bring this universe to life. And to see his final moments in this film, heartbreaking, but amazing. I mean, it made me love Robert Downey Jr. I would take a bullet for that man at this point for playing the character the way that he did. But that final moment for Tony, with Spider-Man and Pepper, it wasn't cliche. It wasn't garbage. It wasn't written the way you would expect to be written. It was written very real. Because it wasn't, I love you and goodbye. It was, we're going to be okay. And you can rest now. And, it's got me tearing up now. 1 minute. As someone who said goodbye to a lot of people that he loves, that's how you say goodbye. Whoever wrote that knew what they were doing. But specifically, that's how you say goodbye to someone who has a traumatically induced obsession with being the good guy. What a character. Iron Man, of all people. Iron Man was a joke in the comics when I was growing up. And they made him the best hero in the universe. Weird. So I can't wait to see this movie again, and I don't know what this is going to mean moving forward for the Marvel Cinematic Universe. They've definitely written themselves very open and very wide, and I do feel they are moving in a fairly unusual direction. So if this is the last Marvel movie you ever see, I think that's okay, because it is definitely the end of the first chapter and what will probably always be the best chapter, because the way they've written things now, they could definitely destroy things very, very easily. I don't really have a lot of desire to see another Captain Marvel movie, but I definitely want to see more Spider-Man. I definitely want to see more Doctor Strange. And I definitely want to see what they're going to do with Captain America moving forward. I want to see Hawk take up the mantle and fight alongside the Winter Soldier. We now have Thor on the Guardians of the Galaxy ship, and I think that will be an amazing story to tell. I would love to have a Professor Hulk movie to see what they do with that, but just put him in Guardians of the Galaxy 2 for a little while. I would be very happy with that. And, of course, we still have Black Panther, and there's definitely going to be another Black Panther movie. You know that's going to happen. So there's still plenty of movies I want to see. This didn't ruin everything. Far from it. It just depends on how good the movies coming up will be. Time will have to tell over the next 10 years whether or not this was the finale of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and it will just putter out from here, or whether or not it was just the end of the first act, and whether or not there are amazing fantasy stuff to come along in the future. I really hope that's the case, but who knows? I will say that this is easily one of my favorite movies of all time by itself, and then when you combine it with the last 11 years worth of movies that led up to this point, it's one of my favorite cinematic experiences of my entire life, and probably always will be. If I live another 50 years, I don't think they can top this. So thank you, Stan Lee, for these stories. Excelsior. And Stan Lee's final cameo is amazing, and I think it's a great place to wrap up this review. It's sad that that has to be his final cameo, but if that is going to be his final cameo, what an amazing one. A young Stan Lee driving by in a car, saying something that he was the cornerstone of his philosophy. Make love, not war. We'll miss you, Stan. Now, this is one man's opinion. I know that I could be wrong. And if I am, let me know in the comments section below. What parts of the movie should I have talked about? What parts of the movie did you like? Which parts did you hate? While you're down there, hit subscribe to the channel if you want to see more videos starring little old me. Drop a like on this video so YouTube knows that you liked it. Do all of the YouTube stuff. Hit that notification bell so you can be one of the first people to watch a video when it goes live. And if you do that, you can make sure that video is successful throughout its lifetime. So just by watching that video early and dropping a like on it, you can make me successful here on YouTube. And I hope that you choose to do so. Guys, as always, thank you for watching. I'll speak with you again soon. And I love you 3000.